Good evening and welcome. I hope everyone's doing well. We're going to look at some fascinating questions tonight that people have sent in. Our shir tonight is sponsored by Kevin Levine in memory of his father, Avrami Rachmiel ben Baruch HaLevi. May his soul be elevated in the Garden of Eden. If you want to send in questions, there are several ways you can do it. One way is you can write in the comments, even as we're speaking. If I'm able to, I will address your questions live, if we can fit it in. Otherwise, I will deal with them in future classes. So you can put them in the comments, or you can email me, rabbimoss@nefesh.com.au, or through WhatsApp or any other means to send me questions, and I'm happy to address them here. If there's something private that you want to ask me privately, you can also do that, and I'm happy to try and answer. So, I don't know if you saw, but one of the things we discussed last night became big news today, not to do with our discussion, but we were talking about having live streaming of your Seder, and would it be permissible to leave on a video camera live streaming between family members, particularly being that elderly members of the family are isolated and can't join with their children and grandchildren. So could you live stream them and include them in your Haggadah telling in the Seder night? And we said last night that clearly no, that is not permissible. You can only use such means in cases of absolute emergency where a life is at risk. And here, even though it's very painful for us to be separate, but it's not actually risking lives. An article went out in the Israeli online press and shot through social media, where a group of rabbis had apparently signed a halachic decision saying that it is permissible this year to zoom in or to live stream people who can't be at your Seder. And well, it went all over the place, and people sent it to me as well and said, I guess we don't agree with these rabbis. What's the story? Not long after seeing that article, I also received further notifications from some of the rabbis who were signatories on that, who said that it was not reported as it actually happened. And basically these rabbis said that there was a closed group of rabbis discussing this issue as the question had come up. And a group of rabbis had said that in a circumstance where there is a risk to life, it is permissible to have the Zoom on, have some live streaming on. That is, if you have an elderly person who's by themselves on the night of the Seder, and you don't even know how they're doing. Are they okay? So to have that connection, that would be permissible. If you could even establish that by somebody not being at the Seder, there's a risk that they will descend into a deep depression and lose their fight for life, lose their will to survive. Okay, then there is a specific permission for such a case to have the streaming going, because it's saving a life potentially. They are extreme cases. On a normal circumstance, that would not apply. And so therefore, the way that the headline looked as a blanket permission to live stream your Seder, to share it with your family, that is certainly not what it was, even if you read the article more carefully. And it was specifically talking about emergency situations to save life. So that we can leave at that it is still the same as we discussed yesterday. I want to share with you something that I received also through WhatsApp, and I was asked about its validity. Now, we know these days on WhatsApp, we're getting a lot of stuff. And this just came in this morning to my WhatsApp. I'm going to translate it. It was in Hebrew, but I'll say it in English. It was a quote from a rabbi. I won't say the rabbi's name, because the rabbi didn't send this. Somebody else sent this. But it was quoting a very respected Kabbalist, a mystic from Israel. And this rabbi says this message: said that he dreamt a dream where a very holy person revealed themselves to him in this dream and said that he wants the entire Jewish people to know that this happened, this dream happened, and that this person has revealed himself in this dream for the first time in 2,000 years. This person has not appeared in a dream, but he's done this for the first time to this rabbi in Israel, his first appearance. And the message continues. In 3 hours from when you read this message, you will receive a phone call that will make your week. The best thing that could happen to you. If you send this message further, if you forward it to 20 people in the next half an hour, only then will you receive that joyous phone call within the next 3 hours. But if you do not send on this message and you ignore it, this will be the worst week in your life. This is true and checked. This is authenticated, says the message. And then in brackets it says you have nothing to lose, so you might as well forward the message. So this is how I received it. And the question is there any validity? Should I take this seriously? Should I be forwarding this message? Is bad things going to happen if I don't? Do I have nothing to lose by just sending it anyway? So I have to say that I can't call myself a Kabbalist, but I've read a few Kabbalistic works here and there, and I've never seen any of them after teaching a lesson or an insight. I've never seen any of them say, please forward this to 3 people. I've never seen an honest Kabbalist ever say that if you don't share my teaching, bad things are going to happen to you. And if you do, good things are going to happen to you. I have seen that in chain mail. Remember those chain letters that you used to get? I've seen that in these ridiculous forwards and posts. I've never seen it from an authentic source. And I cannot imagine that somebody who truly is a Kabbalist and truly is a mystic and really has something to teach and to offer would threaten that if you don't forward my message, bad things are going to happen to you. It is palpably ridiculous. Any message that ends that way, forward this or bad things are going to happen. And if you do forward it, good things are going to happen. You know that that's absolutely false. It's garbage. Apart from the fact that the content of this particular one, it looks like a farce because it has no message. That I had a dream of somebody who hasn't come down in 2,000 years. Therefore what? What are you saying? What are you talking about? And when it says that you have nothing to lose by forwarding it, yes, you do. You have your credibility to lose, because when you forward junk, so then people don't listen to you. And that junk just gets promoted and it clouds the truth. Because in a time like this, we want direction, we want inspiration. We don't want to waste our time. And unfortunately, the nature of social media is that you have to sift through a lot of garbage to get the worthwhile messages. So I think generally, if you're getting a message quoting a Kabbalist, a rabbi, any spiritual source, so you need to check that it is authentic, that it is coming from a true source. People are making up stuff now. There is a certain kick people get out of something going viral that they made up. It's like a form of prank, I guess. But it does waste a lot of people's time. And so check if it's from an authentic source. If you have a rabbi you can check it with, ask the rabbi, is this legitimate or not? There was one going around saying that the rabbis have got together and decided that Pesach is going to be a month later this year, just like there is sometimes a Jewish leap year, where the month of Adar, which were just ended, is doubled. There's 2 Adars, and therefore Pesach is later in the year. So even though this year is not a leap year, but the rabbis have decided it's a leap year. So went this message going around, and so therefore Pesach is going to be a month later. This was total garbage, completely made up, and had no basis whatsoever. It could confuse people. I don't think people actually have started planning for a Pesach a month later. However, you can really lead people astray. And so it's important for us to only forward things that are valid and that are real. That's true of stuff from so-called quotes from rabbis or Kabbalists. It's also true of medical information. That if you get somebody sends you a video or a clip or information of ways to avoid the virus, or how to tell if you've got it, or statistics or whatever it might be, don't just believe it because it's a well-made video. Check and see that these sources are valid, because the misinformation can risk lives. And so don't be a source of misinformation, and don't forward things if they're not from a valid source, both medical, rabbinic, spiritual, Kabbalistic. Jokes, on the other hand, you can forward them, even if they're not all that funny. A little smile, a little laugh at this time is definitely worthwhile. As long as they're clean, it's worth sending the jokes. So that's the issue with that one. We're going to go to a bit of a heavier question now. And that is something that I've received in different ways, in different wording several times. What do we answer when someone asks me, how could God bring the coronavirus to hurt the whole world? How do we answer that question? How can we explain God bringing the coronavirus to hurt the entire world? This is a question coming from a sincere place of pain, that we see people suffering, people dying. And if you're a person of faith, you have a question. The question is a real valid question. If you don't have faith, by the way, if you don't believe in God, so then there's no question why this happened. It happened. Things happen. It's random. There's no why if there's no God. But for we who have faith, we're the ones who have a question. How could God let this happen? We understand that this is a virus that started by somebody somewhere, whatever the real story is. Somebody did something maybe not so clever, not so smart, not so healthy, and it caused the virus to spread. But ultimately, God is in charge of the universe, and anything that happens in the world, it's from him. And so the question for a believer is a valid, important, vital, painful question. How can God allow these things to happen? Why is he doing this? What's his reason? So to approach this question, I first want to just relate to you a little episode that happened today in my home. I was accosted by my 10-year-old daughter, Hannah. She accused me of being a hypocrite, of contradicting myself. She said that in one of my earlier classes, I said that if you hear anybody explaining to you why the coronavirus happened, if anyone comes and tells you, you know why this happened? I'll tell you, because the world was immoral, because people are sinning, because people are eating things they shouldn't be eating. Anyone who tells you a reason why the coronavirus is happening, I said, you know it's fake, it's false, because we don't know why things happen. Unless you're a prophet that God tells you why he's doing things, we don't know. This is what I said in an earlier class. Then my daughter tells me, then in another class, you said that Mashiach is coming, that this is a sign that we're going into a new world, and Mashiach, the Messiah, is about to come and change our entire reality. And you basically gave an explanation, says my daughter. You on one hand says that no one can say why the coronavirus happened, and then you in the next class say that the coronavirus is happening because Mashiach is coming, and God is bringing Mashiach, and so therefore he's getting the whole world to do tshuva, to repent, to introspect, to change their ways, to connect, to unite. You gave an explanation for the coronavirus after saying that anyone who gives such an explanation is a false prophet. You can reject what they're saying. So, says my 10-year-old daughter, you contradicted yourself. I appreciated the accusation. I appreciated the question from her. And to explain it, I said to her, there's a difference between saying why something happened or what we should do as a result of something happening. There's a difference between saying this is what's happening and this is the cause that brought it about, or saying this is what's happening and this is the response that we need to make towards it. When I suggested that it's possible to say that this event that is happening in the world is an introduction to the coming of Mashiach and a new era, which I really believe, and many people see it, I was not suggesting that this is the reason why it's happening. I was saying this is what our response has to be. This is what we have to take out of it. And that's different to explaining the cause. There is a tendency we have when bad things happen to ask the question, why is this happening? What did I do to deserve this? Why is God bringing this on me? Why is this happening to me? It's a natural response. It's an instinctive response. We want to understand the cause. What did I do to deserve this? And the truth is, we cannot answer that question. We do not know why things happen. We have no idea unless God tells us. But there is a teaching throughout Jewish thinking that says that when something difficult happens to you, you have to become introspective and think, what can I do to fix my ways? How can I use this painful experience to make me into a better person? That's not saying that it's happening to me because I'm not a good person. It's saying, I don't know why it's happening to me. I have no idea what the cause is. God knows that, and I don't know that. What I do know is I need to respond. I need to become a different person. I need to react to it. It has to affect me. It's either going to affect me negatively and make me a worse, bitter, negative person, or it's going to affect me positively and I'm going to become a stronger, deeper, more sensitive person. That's my choice. I can't choose what happens to me, but I can choose my response. I can choose where I take it. I can choose what it makes out of me. And so therefore, when a moment like this is happening, let's look at what should our global response be. Something has occurred in the world that has united all of us together, that we're all fighting against the common enemy, that is not another person, it's not another nation. It's an invisible disease that is attacking us, and so we're all on the same page. What should we do with this? Should we become embittered about it? Should we become angry about it? Or should we resolve to say, I'm going to become a more sensitive person now because I know that there are people suffering out there and I can help them. I can help them by following the directives of the doctors and the medical professionals of staying away and slowing down the spread of the virus. I can help them by sending charity for those who are in need, encouragement for those who are alone, and I can actually make the world better as a result of this very difficult situation that the world is in. That's my response to it. I'm not saying that this is happening because our world is rotten. I'm not saying that God is punishing us, that this disease is a punishment from God because we've been immoral. No, who am I to say that? Unless God tells me that that's what he's doing, I have no idea what he's doing. But what I can say is this is my response to it. And that is a very different attitude. We're not looking back to find the cause. We're looking forward to say, where are we going from here? What are we doing with this? That, I believe, is the meaning of what it says in the Talmud, that when a person suffers, they should look carefully at their own behavior. Not because you're looking for the cause of the suffering, but you're saying, I want this suffering to be an impetus for good, to be a springboard for my improvement, to become a better person. And that is, I think, a positive response to this. So the question was, how could Hashem bring the coronavirus to hurt the world? I don't know. I don't know how. I don't know why. This question is just an example of a huge question, the question of human suffering. Why is there any suffering in the world? Why did God create a world where innocent people suffer, where people die in pain, where there's sickness that devastates the world? Why is the world like this? I don't know. Nobody knows. Nobody can explain that. All we can do is respond to it. There's a difference between an answer to a question and a response to a question. And the difference is this. Let's say I would be able to answer the question. What if I could sit here and if you give me 20 minutes, I will explain to you why God sends suffering to the world. I will explain to you why innocent people die and good people get sick. And I could give you, let's say I could give you an explanation that would be satisfying, that you could walk away and say, now I get it. Now it makes sense. There's a reason, there's a divine reason why people have to suffer, and it makes sense, it fits in, I'm comfortable with it, I'm okay with the explanation now. Imagine I could do that in the next 20 minutes. What type of person would you walk away from that being? A horrible person. You'd be a person who could then see the suffering of innocent people and be happy because you've got an explanation. You're comfortable with it, you're okay, it's fine, because I know why it's happening. You would be a less moral person, a worse person than you were before understanding it, because you can make peace with the suffering of innocent people. At the moment, we don't understand why innocent people suffer. We do not understand why God allows this in his world. And because we don't understand it, we don't tolerate it. We don't accept it. It infuriates, it upsets, it angers us. And that's good, that's okay. Having faith means being able to say, God, why? Our great leaders, Moses, he also asked God, why did the Jewish people suffer in slavery in Egypt? What did they do wrong? He asked that question of God, and he didn't get an answer. He wasn't given an explanation. And what did he do? He alleviated their suffering. He did something about it. He tried to help people who were suffering and take the suffering away. That is a very different thing to getting an explanation. That is responding to the suffering. If I have an explanation, I can be peaceful with it. I can be happy with it. I can walk on. I can live on. If I have no explanation, it doesn't fit into my world. It doesn't fit into my theology. I believe that there's God, and God is good, and he wants good for the world. And yet there's suffering in the world. It doesn't fit. When things don't fit, we're bothered by it. We need to fix it. Not leave it to God to fix, but you fix it. Do something about it. That's only because we have no explanation. And so we need to live with that tension. If I didn't believe in God, I wouldn't have the problem in the first place. What's the question? Suffering happens because it happens. There's no explanation. So therefore, it doesn't have to bother me. It's just one of those things. Because I do believe in God, it bothers me, and I have to do something about it. I have to alleviate suffering. I have to get rid of it. I have to do what I can to help people. So this is ultimately our response, not our answer, but our response to why does God let any suffering happen. Our response is, it's a problem. It's our problem. We have to do something about it. We have to try and alleviate it. Maybe one day there'll be an explanation for all this. That doesn't help me now. What helps me now is doing something about it. You know, there was a great holy man. His name was Rabbi Kusil Yehuda Halberstam, known as the Kloisenberger Rebbe. And he was a survivor of Auschwitz. He went through untold suffering. He lost his wife and 11 children in the Holocaust. And when he came out of that, barely survived, but he survived. So his faith was untouched. His faith was completely unswerving, and he rebuilt himself, his family, his community, and it was an amazing inspiration. Somebody once asked him soon after the war, Rabbi, don't you have questions? Don't you have questions about what did God do? How did God allow this to happen? Don't you question God? So the Kloisenberger Rebbe said, yes, I do have questions, but I'm scared to ask them. I'm scared that if I ask God, how did you let this happen? How could it be that innocent people suffer? How did you do this? If I ask that question, I'm scared God will say to me, I can't explain this to you as long as you're down here on earth. When you're in the world with the earthly finite perspective of human being, you cannot understand the big picture and why things happen. The only way you can understand the answer is up here in heaven. When you see the bigger picture, then you can understand why things happen and that they all have a meaning and a purpose. So the Rebbe said, I'm scared to ask the question because then God might invite me up to see the answer. And I'm not ready for that. I need to be here on earth still. I'm not ready to go up to heaven. I leave the questions for another time. And I think that's a really powerful way of looking at it. We do have the questions, but we don't want to know the answers. We want to be down here in this world helping people because we're bothered by suffering, rather than having an explanation for it, making peace with it, and just allowing suffering to continue. This is our approach. Okay. Going from that quite heavy topic to another very practical one, and one that's, I think, really relevant to many, many thousands of people. It's a Pesach question. That being that Pesach is coming in just 2 weeks, and the main feature of Pesach is the Seder, which is families sitting together, and the highlight, or one of the at least most memorable parts of the Seder, is Nishtana. Nishtana is where the kids ask 4 questions. Why is this night different from all other nights? And they list the differences in this and the things about Pesach that are unique. They sing it in a tune that they've studied and learnt at school. And this is right at the beginning of the Seder night. And it sets the tone that for the rest of the night, we're telling the story of the Exodus from Egypt, the Jewish people being saved from slavery, God taking us out with a mighty hand and leading us towards the desert to receive the Torah, to go to the promised land. So the questioner asks me, is there any point in having a Seder if there is no next generation to pass the stories on whilst we're in isolation? The whole point of the Seder is to tell the story to the next generation, to the children. Is there any point in having the Seder when there are no children there? If I'm in isolation, all by myself, I should have a Seder? Who am I telling the story to? What's the point of it? There's no kids there to listen to it. We said earlier, you can't zoom in, you can't live stream to connect to the kids unless there's some absolute emergency. So what's the point in having a Seder this year? Should we just cancel it? Should we just forget about it? If I'm alone. I read this story last year and the year before. I already know what the answers are to the question. So I'm not informing anybody. I'm not telling anyone the story that don't know it. So if the kids aren't there to say the Nishtana, is there any point in doing the Seder this year? It's a painful question. And I know for so many people, Pesach represents being with family and community and extended family. And it's an intergenerational experience of the elders speaking to the kids, and often the other way, the kids explaining things to the elders as well. And indeed, it is the Torah describes the Seder night with the words "V'higadata levincha b'yom," that you should tell your children on that day. The whole point of the Seder is to tell the children. The word Haggadah is to tell. From this verse, tell the children the story. And there are so many things we do at the Seder in order to arouse the children's curiosity and to involve them. It's true that the whole focus is to tell the next generation. So if I'm a grandparent sitting by myself, but my grandkids aren't there, or if I'm on my own, I don't have children, and I'm sitting by myself doing a Seder, what's the point? Because I'm not telling anybody the story. So this question was addressed long ago. The Talmud speaks of what happens when you do a Seder on your own. And it's codified in Jewish law. The Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law, says the following, that in a place where there are no children to ask the Nishtana, so then the youngest in the crowd, the youngest adult in the crowd, should say the Nishtana, should ask the questions. And this, says the Shulchan Aruch, is even if all the people present are great scholars, very learned in the story of the Exodus from Egypt, so they don't really need to be asking questions. They know the answers already. Nevertheless, one of them present has to ask the Nishtana. It has to be asked. And then it continues. Even a single person sitting by themselves doing the Seder night needs to open with Nishtana, asking the questions. ask yourself the questions, because that is the Seder, that is the order, that is the way things are doing. It has to be done by starting off with a question, asking, because through that, the story is more complete. Through asking a question, the story is more complete. What does that mean? That means if you're sitting by yourself, you need to have a dialogue with yourself. You have to have a conversation where you ask the questions, Nishtana, and then you answer the questions. And the entire Seder has to be done in a way of asking and answering, explaining to someone. Who's the someone? Yourself. If you're by yourself, yourself. You are the kid asking the question, and you are the adult giving the answer. So says the Shulchan Aruch, paraphrasing what the Talmud says in this case of being alone for Seder. What does it mean that the story is more complete that way? How's it more complete? I'm here sitting knowing the story and asking and then answering. How is it more complete? So I think what it's saying is that there is something about asking a question that changes the entire dynamic of a discussion. When a question is asked, it's an opening to learn more. If you're not asking questions, it means you're closed off from learning. When you are asking questions, it means you're opening yourself to something new. The reason why the kids ask the questions is because children are naturally good at this. They have a natural curiosity, an openness, and a willingness to learn. And so therefore their questions are natural to them. And kids are always asking questions, and that's beautiful. We sometimes lose this when we get older. We lose our curiosity. We become a little bit jaded. We've done it all before. We've seen it all before. We know it all. And we lose our ability to learn something new. What this law is saying is that you need to have a child asking you a question. The Seder must have a child asking you a question. And if there are not kids there to ask, to bring this sense of freshness and openness, this curiosity and childlike wonder, if you don't have kids doing it, so then the youngest in the party should do it. And if you don't have anyone, if you're by yourself, then you have to do it. You have to open up the wonder within yourself, the childlike openness that you have inside you. You need to do it yourself and ask the question yourself. You have to feel like, I'm here because I want to learn something new. We read the Haggadah every year and it's the same text, but it's not the same text because there are so much ideas. There is so much wisdom. There are so many different angles in the Haggadah. I guarantee you, none of us know it all. We don't. I'll give you a challenge. Read through the Haggadah. I guarantee you will come up with questions that you never came up with before, even if you have been doing for the last 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years. If you've been doing a Seder every year, I guarantee you'll notice something in the Haggadah that you never saw before. You didn't even know it was there. And you'll say, why is that there? What does that mean? What is this talking about? There are new things that you will see if you're open to it. And so therefore, if you're doing this Seder by yourself, what you need to do is you need to open yourself to say, I've never read this before. This is new. I'm a child just wanting to learn, just being a sponge, taking in this information and seeing it new with fresh eyes. And to help you do that, I would strongly recommend for everybody to get a new Haggadah commentary for this year, especially if you're going to be alone. And even if you're not, get a new Haggadah, a new commentary. There are thousands of great commentaries on the Haggadah available in English. And go online. There's still time to get it shipped. Hopefully, it'll get here on time. You can also print stuff out from websites such as Chabad.org that have huge amounts of insights on the Haggadah. And I will also be sending out things to help you. Please do this to open your childlike curiosity for this Seder this year, because there is so many new layers that you can find and you can learn if you open that child within you. So the child has to be at the Seder. And if you're there by yourself, you're the child. And then you could be the adult discovering the answers within and finding fascinating new insights. I also want to say another point on this question. Indeed, the purpose of the Seder is to communicate to the next generation, educate our children about our identity, that the Jewish people came from slavery. God took us out. made us into a nation. We went from the lowest of the low to absolute freedom and being God's people, not because we earned it, because God took us out. This is our story, the story of the Jewish people. It's inspiring. It means that no matter what situation you're in, you can be taken out of it. No matter how low you've gone, you can climb your way up. Call out to God and he will respond. He will be there for you. That's the story of the Seder, the story of the Haggadah, the story of Pesach. And we're telling this to our children. It's the greatest moment of identity transportation, where we're transporting our identity to the next generation. Now that's true of a Seder, a family Seder, where you have intergenerational interaction. You have the parents, grandparents, children. You have people together telling the story. Yeah, we understand that. But what about a Seder where the kids aren't there? What about a Seder where no one's there except for one person on their own? How is that Seder educating the next generation? How is that giving over to the next generation? Yes, we said the person themselves could inspire themselves, could learn, could be their own inner child speaking to them, their adult, and having a new experience of learning. How is that helping the children, the next generation? I want to say, particularly to those people who do not have children and who maybe don't have family and maybe are on their own, you are also raising my children. You're also a part of bringing up the next generation. The way you behave, the way you live your life impacts my children as well, because you're a part of my community. You're a part of my world. And so therefore my children are seeing you and are being influenced by you, even if you don't know it. The way you behave in your home on Seder night is also impacting my children and all the children of our time. Because if you are a person who's connected to yourself, to your soul, to your people, if you're clear in your identity, then you are adding to our community a collective identity that affects all of us, adults and especially children. So it matters to my children that you are going to make a Seder this year by yourself. And you're going to ask the Nishtana to yourself and ask those questions. And you're going to learn a new layer of identity, of understanding. You're going to connect to the Pesach. It matters to my children that you do that. And so a person should never feel that they are an island, that they're isolated, and that they've got no part in bringing up the next generation. You do. You absolutely do. And it absolutely matters. And I think this year, maybe for many of us, we're going to experience what it's like to be a bit more lonely on a night like the Seder. And maybe we can also become more sensitive to others who are often in that situation, are often lonely. Not to feel sorry for people, not to look at them as a nebuch case, as we'd say in Yiddish, that they're like a poor old this, a poor old that. Many people are very happy on their own and have a beautiful, meaningful life on their own. But I think we should appreciate what it means to have each other and to honor those people who are alone and remember that they are impacting all of us. So with that, I'd like to close tonight by wishing everybody a good night, a safe night, and a safe rest of the week. Prepare for Pesach. Get ready. Get your homes ready, but more importantly, get your souls ready for an inspiring Pesach. Pesach is the time of redemption, the time of freedom. And just like we were redeemed once at Pesach, so too we will be redeemed again in Pesach, and we'll go out of this exile of the loneliness that there is in the world, and we'll come to a beautiful new time of redemption. Thank you. Please remember to send in questions, and we'll be back on, God willing, tomorrow night. Thanks for listening.